Gary Vasey here with Comtech Advisory, and I'm in London today with Henry Bonner, who's Head of Commodity Solutions with OpenLink, and we're going to talk about non-energy commodities. Henry, hello, how are you?
Hey Gary, good to see you again.
So Henry, we understand that OpenLink now has close to 300 clients in the ags and soft commodity space. What kind of solutions are these customers using?
When we look at the clients that we have, we really see them fitting into three segments of that. Firstly, origination, so organizations who are typically procuring raw commodities from the farm gate, for example grain, loading grain into an elevator, perhaps blending it and then selling it out, or potentially owning much more of that value chain all the way through to endpoint distribution and sometimes milling and production and other manufacturing. The second set of clients we have is really in that midstream of trading. So organizations who are trading agricultural commodities, soft commodities globally. Some of them do have origination, so some of them do have physical assets, but on the whole they're trading around freight, so a lot of international trade with the complexities that brings, as you know. They tend to be very global organizations. The third group is organizations who really make their living out of selling finished goods. So those would be the food and beverage companies, consumer packaged goods companies, chemicals companies. And their concern is the exposure that they have to commodities as a raw material, and they're then using those commodities in the manufacturing process, and the end point being their finished good. So those are really the three areas that we work with. So the additional area where we've added a lot of value to analyzing the supply chain is a solution that we call Direct Spin Scorecard. This is directly aimed at organizations who produce finished goods, and are interested in looking at the volatility of their cost of goods sold. To do that, they need to understand all of the raw materials that are used to produce their finished good, which we model, and then compare that with what's currently stored in inventory in their production facilities, what's currently committed in forward markets, and how much they're really putting at risk. Mm-hmm. So really for the first time, these manufacturing organizations, and by that I mean food and beverage companies, consumer packaged goods, chemicals companies, plastics, etc., can really look at what their forward commitment is to their finished goods and what their exposure is to both the current commodity markets and the forward commodity markets, and then hedge around that. And that really provides a huge amount of transparency. And you can imagine how complex that gets, and we bump into these sort of big data issues where you have organizations with tens of thousands of stock keeping units, and each one of the SKUs has to be modeled potentially independently against the underlying commodity exposure.
You know, it's a very large area, obviously, and you'll be aware that in our recent market sizing exercise back in 2013, Comtech saw ags and softs as potentially being one of the biggest growth sectors for software, CTRM software in the space. So it's an ideal place for OpenLink to be, and it's an ideal place for you to have an interesting strategy to go forward. And with that in mind, what I'd like to ask, Henry, is what do you see as driving this sector, and where do you think the opportunities are for OpenLink?
So I think the drivers more than ever are really organizations looking to manage the volatility. I think that's been the case for a long time. What's really increased the interest is particularly in the ag sector and the CPG and the food and beverage sectors, is really for the first time these organizations can do that in a very intelligent way. And the systems are now available that really help them understand what their exposures are and what the volatility is. So I think that volatility, or the underlying volatility of the commodities, continues to be a strong driver as they look to manage those. Further than that, I think that certainly in the trading markets, in that second area we mentioned where we offer solutions to the midstream traders, they're looking at ever more sophisticated and complex deal types, managing the optionality around freight, structured products, with all the complexity that brings. And again, helping them manage that gives them a massive competitive advantage. And we see that sort of spread opening up wider between the top end of the market and the very sophisticated players and some of the perhaps more old-fashioned players who have yet to adopt. I think the third piece is really beginning to understand how the traditional ERP, enterprise resource planning solutions, can coexist and can really benefit from the introduction of a CTRM solution, Whereas historically, I think that a lot of people have considered that ERPs are really able to do all of this and have perhaps overlooked the opportunities that CTRM can bring them. Today, I think that there's a pretty solid understanding developing of how CTRMs can really help an existing ERP deployment to really add value to these organizations.
I think that's absolutely right, and we definitely agree. Well, Henry, I'm sorry that that's all we've got time for today. I'd like to thank you for appearing in this Comtech Advisory video. And once again, this is Gary Vasey with Comtech Advisory. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.